I came back from 3-1 down. I feel pretty good. I want to get this tie. I always have confidence in myself, Jimmy.
Pressure Dream. Everyone's watching.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah, just, I don't know.
Oh my lord, I'm getting cooked!
Dream beat me. I was like, okay, Dream, you really been practicing, bro. Good on you. Like, I was pleasantly surprised with how good he was. You know, being his POV next to each other or whatever. That makes sense. I think that's pretty cool. So I went ahead and I checked out his POV, right? And he's cheating. He's aimbotting.
On January 21st, 2026, Dream uploaded 2 consecutive streams on his Twitch channel where he 1v1 viewers in mindman.club. Recently, Dream has been more involved in the PvP community, appearing on several streams with the creator Ximity, as well as many streams of his own where he was trained by PvPers like Swite and Codified. Now, about 2 days later, a discussion in Reddit began to materialize concerning Dream's recent gameplay. A burner account by the name of RealPreference8303 published a post regarding recent accusations against the creator Dream for using aim assist. Soon, another creator by the name of Mario Kart made a similar video where he accused Dream of aimbotting in his 1v1. The link to both are in the description. Now, personally, I like to play detective, so I did a bit of digging myself. As I went through his streams, it was immediately clear that Dream was using some sort of aim assist. Now, at first, I believed this was a recent decision on his behalf, but I later came across his 100k duel with Technoblade, and I was surprised to find that Dream had been doing this for a very long time, even going as far back as 2019. To put this in perspective, this includes his manhunts, MC championships, and almost every video on his channel. Now, obviously, this was very surprising to me, considering he was exposed for cheated speedruns in the past, so I found it very confusing on why he continued to cheat despite all the drama he had to go through. So when I initially heard about the accusations of Dream cheating, I simply didn't believe it. Now, there's no doubt that Dream is skilled at making himself look legit. Average viewers would probably not notice that Dream was using aim assist throughout the VOD, because of how subtle his amplifier was. Now, if you're confused on what an amplifier is, it's essentially a curve that changes the extent in which your Minecraft cheat will perform. This is very synonymous to your typical sensitivity option in Minecraft, where you can change the speed in which your mouse moves. The difference with aim assist is that changing the sensitivity changes the magnitude of the aim assist. So it's reasonable to assume that Dream likely used a lower sensitivity when cheating in his streams. Now, when gathering evidence, I avoided using gameplay footage as a pure form of accusation, as gameplay, as I'm sure you all know, is very debatable, as one individual may not see a clip the same way as another. So instead, I used mathematics. Now, I'm not that good at math, and I'm sure a lot of you watching the video are not either. So I ended up calling my friend, who by the way has a master's degree in statistics from the University of Chicago, and he ended up creating a mathematical analysis that essentially exposed his Dream. Now in the actual video I won't be getting deep into this math, but instead focus on the main basics of why Dream is cheating. Now this video will be divided into 5 sections, each of which will focus on a specific discussion surrounding the scandal. I encourage you to watch this chronologically to fully understand my later explanations, but either way, it's up to you, and let's begin. In April 2025, Dream had a boxing match with his friend Sapnap to train for an IRL event called Creator Clash 3. In the process, he broke one of his vital bones called the scaphoid, which essentially impairs the ability to consistently track enemies. Now, considering Dream had the most severe case of this injury, his tracking abilities should be significantly impaired. However, looking at his gameplay during this period, I noticed that his tracking was still relatively the same. In fact, he even ended up hitting his absolute peak in PvP despite having the injury. Now, this came across as very odd to me, but I brushed it off as any average person would, assuming that Dream simply got used to the injury. Following up, I came across a stream made by Eximity, where I noticed that Dream ended up beating him 5-1 in Sword PvP, which is insane, considering how good Eximity is as a PvPer. I was curious to see Dream's perspective on these games, but he unfortunately did this off camera, so I simply assumed that he got better, as any other person would. Now, you're probably wondering why I am credible in making this video, as I am a Roblox YouTuber and not some PvP genius who knows everything. And the reasoning is because I used aim assist myself. In my opinion, it takes a cheater to identify another cheater, as we are more knowledgeable when it comes to the mechanics of these exploits. We also tend to develop a quote-unquote gut feeling that essentially tells that something is off with a person's gameplay. Finally, I'd like to end off this section by saying that knowing how aim assist works is fundamental to understanding how Dream is cheating, which is why I will give a brief overview of how aim assist works in the next section. Let's begin. Aim assist in Minecraft PvP is very similar to typical aimbot in FPS games. I myself have explored this in several videos that I have on Roblox Arsenal, where aim assist was used constantly by individuals within the community. The point of an aim assist or aimbot is to consistently keep the crosshair on the enemy player. This lets the player avoid slip-ups and bad aim during 1v1s. Now, despite this all, aim assist comes with many limitations, both in the player as well as avoiding detection in PvP clips. However, just like any other cheat, there are patterns present within every user. Before I get into these patterns, I will mention a few important details. Number 1. Aim assist typically does not work in long range, but only when in hitting range with the player. This does not apply to all aim assists, but it applies to the wide majority of them. Number 2. Hits typically do not match with the tracking in aim assist. For instance, a person might perfectly track an individual and not consciously hit them because they do not realize this. So when watching the gameplay of aimbotters, you will notice that their hits are somewhat disconnected with their tracking. Number 3. The player is still manually moving their crosshair with aim assist. The aim assist only goes into effect during close range PvP, so a person can still take their crosshair off the player manually when PvPing with aimbot. Number 4. Aim assist can also be deactivated from the gameplay with the click of a button on the keyboard. These are keybinds that can instantly disable the cheat whenever the person chooses to do so. This is a great way for exploiters to avoid unintentional tracking during moments where they aren't PvPing. Additionally, aim assist can also be bypassed through screen shares, PC checks, and even live streams. It also goes undetected in most anti-cheat systems. And finally, number 5, aim assist bypasses tracking slips. Tracking slips or tracking slip-ups are essentially when the player's crosshair fails to predict where the enemy goes when they change direction. Let's say that an enemy is in front of you and you are currently putting them in a combo. The enemy can either move left or right. Now, while most people can predict this, there's almost an inevitable guarantee that they will eventually fail. This occurs in every player, with even the best PvPers in the world failing to predict the enemy's motion when the enemy changes direction. This is because humans cannot react fast enough to consistently track enemies in every fight, as most movements are completely random. A quote from a study states, "If target random motion explicitly contained an additional linear trend, observers tended to utilize information of the linear trend as well. When there's some regularity, people incorporate it into their predictions, but pure randomness does not have regularity to use. The brain doesn't create perfect predictions, but estimates probabilities, becoming more precise when an event's timing is likely and less precise when it's uncertain. This means that when many strafing patterns in players are predictable, these studies show that perfect prediction is statistically impossible." This essentially means that a person who exhibits extremely low tracking slip-ups is almost always using aim assist. In fact, this occurs even when the aim assist is at the lower sensitivity. Here are some examples of players doing tracking slip-ups. You'll want to look at how their crosshair stays in the same spot when the enemy goes off. You'll see this behavior occurring in aimbotters, but it's just not as common. This is either because the person manually moved their mouse or the enemy was fast enough to outrun their aim assist. In most cases, however, you'll never see tracking slip-ups in aimbot gameplay aside from rare exceptions. Now to clarify, a tracking slip-up does not apply to moments where the person is out of hitting range, has the enemy player go through them, and during the first hit of every player collision. The reason for number 2 is that most low sensitivity aimbots are unable to track the enemy when they go through them. Additionally, most cheaters tend to manually use their mouse during these moments in order to outrun their aimbot. Number 3 is also an exception, as aimbot typically starts to function after the first hit on the enemy player. So moments where the enemy moves back and then gets back into the fight is what I refer to as a first collision. I also want to mention that tracking slip-ups do not always refer to moments where the crosshair is off the player, but rather the motion of the crosshair when the enemy changes direction. Now, to understand these mechanics further, I will be using aim assist myself as a demonstration. At first, we have high sensitivity, which shows how cheaters enhance their tracking abilities and reduce slip-ups. Now, we see a major difference between the two, with the lower sensitivity involving manual mouse movements to compensate for the low speed. Aim assist also affects your camera angle when the player gets closer. If you look into Dream's gameplay closely, you'll notice that his camera angles feel artificial. This is not immediately obvious and may take some time to notice. You can also see the bot trying to lock onto the player as I get closer. This is a behavior I noticed in the Dream vs Technoblade duel, which I'll get into later in the video. As you can see, the bot no longer works if the player goes through you. This is only the case for weaker configs, but it shows how manual mouse movements are necessary even with weaker aim assist. This is also why tracking slip-ups are an exception here. As you can see, the bot typically stops working at long range. However, many cheaters manually adjust it, and it's definitely possible to work at long range. This is gameplay where I'm not moving my mouse at all. However, I do manually adjust it in one moment where the player moves away too fast. This indicates that a combination of manual movements and the bot give the best tracking overall, rather than fully relying on the bot. This explains why a lot of aim assist gameplay typically looks normal.
I'm Steven. I'm a statistics major at the University of Chicago, and I specialize in advanced statistical modeling and quantitative research. On January 21st, 2026, Galestic provided me specific criteria in regards to tracking slip-ups, so I spent the next 24 hours analyzing Dream's gameplay. To verify whether Dream's performance was legitimate, 1 hour of his gameplay was analyzed and compared against 1 hour samples from 12 established PvPers. This comparison group consisted of top-tier competitors, including names like Marlowe and Sharpness. This footage does not contain any moments of Dream engaging in external activities in order to ensure the analysis remains accurate. I then recorded the number of slip-ups in each 5-minute segment of Dream's gameplay, and applied the same method to everybody else. To compare our findings, Galestic decided to use aim assist himself for about an hour, and sent me his gameplay. I organized all of the data into a cumulative frequency graph, which essentially shows the total number of slip-ups after each 5-minute interval. After compiling all the data points, the following graph was constructed. You'll notice that Galestic is at the bottom of the list, with a total frequency of 21 slip-ups. The only person to even come close was Flowtives, with 30 cumulative slip-ups. Now let's add Dream into the picture. Things aren't looking good for Dream here. Dream's slip-ups came out to a remarkable count of 9. Dream actually outperforms the aimbotter himself, and by a large margin as well. With this, along with the fact that he has half the frequency errors of Flowtives, I have to conclude that Dream is illegitimate.
After this data was released, the expert concluded that Dream's tracking slip-ups was on average 10 times lower than that of top-tier PvPers. Not only is this unrealistic, it's statistically impossible. From a purely logical standpoint, it's absurd to assume that players with 4+ years of dedicated PvP experience would track at barely 10% of Dream's level, especially when Dream is primarily known as a speedrunner. Moreover, key elements of Dream's PvP, like hit timing, movement, and advanced mechanics, appear noticeably lacking throughout his gameplay. There appears to be a disconnect between his tracking precision and the rest of his combat fundamentals, even when these aspects are typically interrelated. This contrast is precisely why flow types, despite raising suspicion, is likely legitimate, as his tracking aligns naturally with the rest of his gameplay. It's highly improbable for one aspect of a player's skill set to be so exceptionally strong while the rest remains somewhat average. That imbalance alone raises questions. So the conclusion doesn't come from a few data points on a graph, but from the combination of multiple inconsistencies in his gameplay that all point in the same direction. Finally, after analyzing hours and hours of Dream's gameplay, the expert concluded using the Poisson distribution that the probability of Dream being a legitimate player was this number right here. Which is 1 times 10 to the power of negative 30, which means that the odds that Dream streams were done without aim assist was about 1 in 833 octillion, assuming that Dream is within the skill range of tier 3 to tier 4 players. With these odds, Dream would need more tickets than all the atoms in the universe in order to win a single lottery. I don't know if you realize how big of a number this is, but it is basically impossible. At this stage, I believe that the evidence points strongly towards Dream cheating, but I still want to examine a few clips. Now, personally, this is something I do not prefer because everyone sees clips differently. However, a few clips stood out to me in Dream's manhunts that I simply could not ignore. Before I get into this, I want to introduce the concept of a micro-track. This is not something I discussed previously, as it's often difficult to spot in Minecraft PvP. A micro-track is a subtle mouse movement that is so precise and minuscule that it cannot be replicated by a human. A micro-track usually occurs when the cursor attempts to move away from the player's hitbox, which then gets stopped by the aim assist. Afterwards, the cursor starts to track at the same velocity and trajectory as the enemy's movement. In normal gameplay, you may see 1 or 2 instances of these over the course of an hour. Dream's manhunts, however, showed at least 33 instances of these micro-tracks, and his livestream showed at least 100 of these instances. For a better illustration, here's an example of a cheater doing the exact same thing in an FPS game.
Let's watch this clip. You can see, alright, we'll go once again frame by frame. Hey, he's peeking out. He's moving his crosshair to the left. Oh shit, he's moving his crosshair to the left. Oh, never mind. Hey. And he's moving his crosshair to the left, and then inexplicably it just fucking stops, sticks to the edge. He's holding this angle. He's holding it. Crosshair's not moving. Oh, what's that? He's tracking the edge of the guy again. Wee woo. He's doing the same shit again.
Now obviously, it would be absurd to analyze every single one of these, so in this segment, I'm only going to use a small portion. As we move through these clips, you'll notice that Dream's crosshair looks unusually still. This isn't because the cursor isn't moving, it's because the tracking is so synchronized with the opponent's movement that it creates the illusion of complete stability. That level of stillness is actually one of the strongest indicators of aim assist at work. Let's begin the analysis.
Now I'm gonna raid somebody because I'm done streaming.
Despite the initial findings raising serious concerns, I wasn't fully convinced. If Dream had employed aim assistance, I believe there had to be more precise methods to expose it. After extensive research, I discovered that Minecraft aim assist modules typically lock onto the center of an enemy's hitbox, specifically the chest region. This insight led me to design a targeted measurement strategy. I would quantify how close Dream's crosshair remained to the central point over time. Using Logger Pro's movie analysis system, I extracted data from approximately 1,000 frames of gameplay, not just from Dream but the other 6 competitive PvPers. I calibrated the system by setting the crosshair as the origin and defining a scale from 0 to 600 pixels, with 200 pixels representing the outer bounds of the enemy's hitbox. Once the data was compiled, I generated a longitudinal aim-error variability graph using advanced automation tools. This graph visualizes the pixel distance between the crosshair and the enemy's chest across all frames. The results are unbelievable. Dream's data forms a narrow band between 150 and 300 pixels, aligning almost perfectly with the hitbox's dimensions. His tracking remains unusually stable and confined, a pattern not observed in any of the other players. In contrast, the 6 legit players exhibit wide fluctuations, erratic corrections, and natural jitter, all hallmarks of human aim behavior. Dream's consistency suggests the presence of an external aim assist mechanism that maintains his crosshair within the hitbox boundaries, effectively locking him onto the target. This behavior is statistically anomalous and visually distinct from the rest of the dataset. Dream's aim error is not just lower, it's mathematically incompatible with human behavior. His Z-score places him far outside the range of all 6 legit players. This is not precision, this is precision beyond biology. A Z-score of negative 2.84 means Dream's average aim error is 2.84 standard deviations below the mean. In statistical terms, this places him in the bottom 0.2% of the distribution, a region reserved for extreme outliers. Therefore, it is beyond a reasonable doubt that Dream is using aimbot in his live streams. Consequently, all data and processed metrics will be available in the description for full transparency and independent verification.
At this point, the investigation naturally leads us to the next major event, the Dream vs Technoblade duel. Hosted by Mr. Beast, this 1v1 pitted 2 of Minecraft's most influential creators against each other for a $100,000 prize. The anticipation surrounding it was enormous, and it quickly became one of the most iconic duels in gaming history. This duel involved 2 versions, 1.8 and 1.9, where the first player to win 6 times would win the prize money. Now, before I begin, I want to say straightforwardly that Dream cheated in this duel. Now, I do not care if the evidence is not concrete in the eyes of the community, I do not care if people do or do not take my word, and I certainly do not care to be convinced otherwise. My job as a creator is to simply speak the truth, and when I am certain beyond a reasonable doubt, I will not be afraid to speak up. I have used aim assist for over a decade, and as a person who has great instincts, Dream's motion in this gameplay was very similar to mine. Most people cannot and will not comprehend this perception unless they've been familiar with the cheat for as long as I have. Nonetheless, there is evidence that Dream was cheating in this duel, and we can start from the beginning. Once again, I asked Steven to observe this entire duel, and he came to the conclusion that Dream had a total of only 1 tracking slip-up, with Techno having about 5 noticeable slip-ups. Now, this duel is not representative of the data previously recorded, as that data purely focused on sword PvP and not any other kit. On the other hand, this duel involved shield and axe PvP alongside swords and fishing rods. Thus, there was an abundance of limitations present within the analysis. Number 1. Dream barely strafed in any of these duels, likely because aim assist often impairs the ability to strafe unless you move backwards, as the camera angle will always face the direction of the enemy's chest, so strafing is something you'll notice to be absent within Dream's gameplay. This explains why Techno only exhibited 5 of these slip-ups despite being a legitimate player. Number 2. The kits being played in 1.9 involve idleness with the shield. Technoblade barely had any instances where he was able to put Dream in a combo, another explanation for his low tracking slip-ups. Number 3. In the 1.8 duels, both players were hitting each other equally. This meant that almost no combos were able to be observed because each player would consistently hit each other back. This meant that every hit would often be a first collision, making the analysis even tougher. Tracking slip-ups also do not apply to 1.8, as the person being comboed often has no time to strafe, leading them to move back. 1.8 1v1s on average have less slip-ups than 1.9 overall. Number 4. On top of all of that, the actual usable gameplay amounted to only about 10 to 11 minutes, limiting our abilities to analyze at full potential. The previous graph came from hours and hours of streams, while this duel only limited us to 11 minutes of real gameplay. Here are also other suspicions that I wanted to include. Number 1. Technoblade is far more experienced in PvP than Dream, so it's completely expected for him to have fewer slip-ups overall. That's the logical baseline, so the fact that this wasn't the case raises significant suspicion. Number 2. Dream plays on a noticeably higher sensitivity than Techno, which should naturally result in more slip-ups, especially during long periods of shield idling in 1.9. Higher sensitivity usually amplifies slip-ups in shield PvP specifically. Number 3. Techno strafed significantly more than Dream, yet he still ended up with 5 times the number of slip-ups Dream had. That discrepancy is unusual and difficult to justify through normal gameplay alone. Now, so far all this info has been suspicious, but nothing is concrete, so instead we will be going back to micro tracks. Okay, so this is the first clip in this duel that made me think that Dream was using aim assist, and also not only using aim assist, but also using aim assist with the rod. So this is the clip right here in full speed. Now this is very subtle, but you can see right there something really weird happens. Now, of course it looks normal at first in really fast speed, and again that's probably one of the reasons why he didn't cut this out, but I mean, this is an uncut duel, I guess, so that doesn't really apply, but so you can see that Dream is putting his rod on Techno, and look what happens right here. Everything is normal. His mouse is completely in the same spot. Everything is normal. Techno's jumping up. Everything is normal. And then as soon as we get to Technoblade's feet, or the edge of Technoblade, you see that for some reason the crosshair starts to subtly move up in this clip, in this frame right here. That's 1 frame, that's 2 frames, that's 3 frames, that's 4 frames, that's 5 frames, and then it goes to around 12. And this is really obvious aimbot because we saw this in the demonstration where I put my crosshair in the feet of a person and you could see that the crosshair went subtly up. Now of course there are a few differences because for starters I used a more stronger version of aimbot. I also was closer in range, I'm pretty sure, and I was also using a different weapon. I was using a sword. So there are a lot of differences between this and also that specific clip, but they're essentially the same thing where you can see that the aim assist is subtly moving up to get to the chest of Technoblade. Alright, so this is the second clip that I want to take a look at. I'm first going to show you this in full speed, but basically what you want to look for is a micro track as well as a trajectory change. I'll explain this in more detail. This is the clip right there. So you probably can't even see anything suspicious because of how subtle it is, but let's go in really slow motion. First of all, they're both hitting each other right now, and you can see about right here a micro track starts to occur. So this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Okay, so about 16 frames we see a micro track. Again, it's really subtle, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you can't catch micro tracks because you simply aren't experienced enough. But that is essentially what a micro track is, and you can see it happening in very slow motion there. But watch what happens right here. This is the most obvious in my opinion. So you can see that Techno starts to move a bit back, and look what happens to Dream's crosshair. You can see that Dream is now trying to look down so that he can rod. So the reason why Dream is looking down is because he knows that Technoblade is going to fall down. So he knows that he should obviously change his camera position, obviously. So we understand why Dream is putting his camera down. But watch what happens. We see that after in 1, 2, 3, 4, you can see that Dream is trying to put his camera angle down, and watch what happens. As soon as we get to Techno's feet, we randomly see, look at this, we get to Techno's feet, and then all of a sudden the crosshair stops, and then it starts moving back up. He's trying to move his crosshair down, and now it starts moving back up. You can see it right there, moving it down, and then it starts to move back up. Right here, you can see that his crosshair is now locked onto Technoblade, and you can see that the micro track or aim assist is preventing him from leaving the person's hitboxes. And you can see that a micro track occurs for about like 4 or 5 seconds, and you can see he also tracks Techno falling down, but that's not suspicious enough to call out. But you can see that this is one of the main instances of Dream blatantly using aim assist, if you can't tell or not. Now this is the final clip, and I'll play this in full speed once again. Now this is a trajectory stop and a micro track. I'll show you in a second. So let's go a few frames back. Okay, so as you can see right here, either Techno or Dream. Okay, so Techno hits Dream, and then Dream is now trying to move his crosshair to the left. So you can see that his crosshair is now going to the left. Now everything is fine, right? Everything is fine. His trajectory is moving left, and he should obviously have his crosshair moving left. Now watch what happens. Because as soon as he look at this, he's moving it to the left, and then all of a sudden, as soon as he gets to the edge of the hitbox, and by the way, a hitbox is bigger than the actual character. You might think, okay, well, it's outside of Techno's character. Well, the hitbox is actually a little bigger than the character. So you can see that his thing is moving out of the hitbox, and then as soon as he gets to the shield, the edge of the shield right here, you see that the trajectory changes and starts moving this way. And it's really, really subtle. And this is a micro track right here, by the way. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so about 5 frames we see a really, really subtle micro track. But you can see that clips like this are really, really obvious, at least to me, but I think it's going to take a lot of time for people to actually understand what's going on, because if you don't have a fundamental understanding of aim assist, then you really can't interpret why any of these are suspicious. But anyways, let's move on to the next section. Nonetheless, here was the expert's ultimate conclusion. Dream's confirmed cheating alongside the clear parallels in how he behaved during this duel makes it very likely that the gameplay was illegitimate. However, the kit's limited movement, the short amount of usable footage, and the lack of measurable data left a great margin of uncertainty. These constraints prevented the conclusion from reaching a full and definitive 100%. This means it is very likely that Dream was cheating in this duel, but it cannot be confirmed with 100% mathematical certainty. Nonetheless, it is undeniable that Dream cheated in both his manhunts and live streams, with the $100,000 duel being put into speculation. While I personally believe that he did cheat in this duel, I cannot say this with 100% certainty based off of mathematics, and this is primarily because of the limited footage. Therefore, I will move on to the next section and accept what I have. The media is no stranger to misinformation. It is absurd how often YouTubers lie, misinterpret, or completely twist information out of context. This unfortunately proceeded to be the case within the PvP community, where it was clear that no one fully understood how these exploits worked. This was the case in both the defending party as well as the opposition. For starters, Mario Kart in the original video claims that the mouse wiggles whenever the player jumps up.
Here, I'll play it again. I'll try and catch it as fast as I can. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. See that? That was perfectly timed from me saying wiggle to when it was wiggling. If you guys can see it, you're going to be able to see it forever. It's going to be very hard for you to not see from now on. I'm going to compare it to another terrible aimbot. This is just a blatant cheat that this guy was using a couple years ago. This is really funny. You can see the same exact shaking. See that? Look at that. Especially when Sham is out of range. You see it? Right when he exits the range, it gets even stronger. It gets stronger the further he's away. That's because the hitbox is further away.
However, this is a false statement and is not a core mechanic of aim assist. The wiggles that Mario shows in his 1.8 clips were actually mistaken for micro tracks, where the cursor is in sync with the person's jumps, hence proving my point. So not only were their claims full of inaccuracies, but the clickbait thumbnails made things even worse by misleading viewers from the start. If you check the comments of these videos, you'll see fans calling them out, and honestly, they have every right to do so. The so-called evidence was barely anything, and a lot of their explanations were just factually incorrect. Dream even reached out to some of these individuals, and they proceeded to private their videos afterward. That alone shows that many had doubts about their own accusations. Moves like that damage credibility and make it obvious that these videos were simply made for the clout and not to genuinely inform an audience. When you don't show confidence in your own argument, it undermines everything from the start. It implies that you never had the solid reasoning to conclude that he was even cheating in the first place. Now, most videos mainly accuse Dream of a cheat known as TriggerBot. Now, what is TriggerBot? TriggerBot is an exploit in Minecraft that automatically swings when the weapon finishes cooldown. This means that half swings or spam clicking is at near absence in their gameplay. The only reason such an action would occur is if they were to manually click themselves. These were the main clips that Dream was accused of.
He's running. He's running. He's really running. He's so scared of me. He's running. Look at him. Yeah, I just baited him. I used his own ego against him. Now we're just gonna kill him.
I can't hit him.
George, where are you? George, where are you? Why are you useless? Like, I actually hate.
I wasn't ready yet. Where are you?
Alright, well, I'm done. So.
I actually don't know where you are.
Bye bye.
He's dead.
Hi guys. Hello.
Oh my God, he's in here! How's he in here? Wait, George, run!
Come here, George.
I recommend that you check Dropkey's video for a better understanding. Getting back into the discussion of misinformation, a creator named Macery uploaded a video defending Dream, where the majority of the video was pure misinformation. Macery claims in his video that TriggerBot automatically swings on the person when the crosshair is on the player, and claims that the clips where Dream didn't swing with the crosshair on the player was evidence that he wasn't TriggerBotting. However, this is a misleading statement, as Minecraft TriggerBot, just like Aim Assist, only starts to function at hitting range. Additionally, he claims that Dream is legit, as TriggerBotters swing more times than legit players. This is also completely false. Think of it like this: Minecraft players miss swings, so if you TriggerBotted, you would actually have fewer swings, as you literally would not be missing swings.
And not gonna lie, when I read that I was like, okay, that literally proves he's not using a trigger bot. Because think about it, if you're using a trigger bot, it automatically swings when your crosshair is on someone, right? But Dream is saying his practice mod had bugs that made him not swing even when he was clicking and aiming at targets. That's literally the opposite of what a trigger bot does. A trigger bot would make you swing more, not less.
There were also other many false claims within the video, but I simply don't have the patience to care. Now, to confirm these allegations, I called an expert to run a reaction time analysis for 2 of Dream's manhunts, and also analyze the time he hit the player in relation to the weapon's cooldown. After analyzing hours of footage, he concluded that Dream is most likely not using TriggerBot. The expert quotes, "Although some moments suggested that he might have been TriggerBotting, other clips immediately contradicted that conclusion. There simply wasn't enough consistency to confidently say that he was cheating, as opposed to the aim assist evidence, which is far more uniform." However, when I reviewed his Speedrunner vs 2 Hunters Revival manhunt, his PvP looked completely different from anything I'd seen before. At first, this was confusing, until Dream left a comment on Dropkey's video that put everything into perspective. Dream responded to these allegations with a set of paragraphs where he claimed to use obscure ways of practicing PvP. After his cast was removed, Dream revealed that he had been using an input blocker, a tool that designs to help stop your melee from swinging if you miss at close range. In other words, it filters out your mistakes and only allows clean, accurate hits. If Dream used this privately as a training tool, this wouldn't be an issue, but Dream was not doing this. He was using it publicly on mcpvp.club, the most competitive and well-known PvP server in the world. And that's where everything changes, because the moment you bring a tool like that into a public arena, especially one built on fairness and skill, you cross a line. This also justifies why Dream was banned from the server for about a month. Now that I've cleared up this misinformation, let's address the counter-arguments. Despite the evidence, many counter-arguments could be made to disapprove this video and to claim that Dream is really legit. However, the majority of these arguments are misguided. The first and probably most valid argument is biased data. For starters, a lot of the streams that were analyzed occurred on varying dates across the year, meaning that some of these individuals could exhibit lower tracking slip-ups in recent gameplay. Now, this is true, but it still doesn't explain the immense discrepancy observed in the data between Dream and other PvPers, considering the skill gap between the individuals. It could also be said that the players Dream went against were not as skilled, but this argument falls apart as similar behavior was observed in his 1v1 to Tryhard. Despite Tryhard being one of the best sword PvPers in the world, Dream's number of tracking slip-ups were still abnormally low. The second argument for why Dream is legit would probably be that he is not that great at PvP. Numerous videos on YouTube show Dream getting annihilated by PvPers. These individuals include Rapture and Dolly. So it's understandable why people have a hard time believing that he's cheating, as you'd expect him to outperform the top players if he was truly using an exploit. However, Minecraft PvP is very complicated and comes with many techniques and learned behaviors, meaning that aim assist alone, especially at the low sensitivity that Dream is likely using, would not result in outperforming the best of the best. In fact, it's reasonable to assume that Dream would intentionally try to play bad in order to reduce suspicion, as people would have a hard time believing that an average PvPer would be capable of cheating. We can see this in various moments throughout the stream where Dream appears to troll against random players.
Watch this. I really want to crossbow them to death. Nah, I just tried.
This appears to contradict previous behaviors in which he tried his best to maintain his reputation. Of course, an argument could still be made that he no longer cares, but I still think it's a point that needs to be addressed. Another argument would be that Dream wouldn't cheat after his speedrun scandal. However, this belief is not applicable in this scenario because of Dream's ADHD. This disorder affects impulse control, which is something that Dream has addressed numerous times in the past.
This is probably the number one critique of me as a person, is that I'm very impulsive. I am very impulsive. I'm very impulsive. I would love to, work on that. I feel like a lot. I have improved a lot on my impulsiveness, I guess, from when I first started as a creator.
Meaning that he is more likely to cheat when it's easy to get away with it, especially in games where he must maintain a consistent performance. A normal PvPer, especially one with ADHD, lacks the ability to be consistent, meaning that he is more likely to get frustrated over bad performances, making him more likely to cheat in order to maintain consistent gameplay. We see him doing this in the speedrun scandal too, where he increased Pearl and Blaze rates in order to gain consistent runs. While many of these exploits are subtle, it is Dream's intention to keep it that way in order to gain a slight but unobvious advantage. The third counterargument is that if Dream was cheating, then the anti-cheat would detect it, which I personally believe is a very stupid thing to say, as the anti-cheat in most servers cannot detect aim assist, as the game detects aimbot as a legitimate controller input, making it hard to differentiate between a robot and an actual mouse movement. If servers were to implement such systems, they'd be at a high risk of false positives, making the situation even worse than it was before. The final counterargument is that Dream genuinely improved his tracking because he trained with Coldified. Now, I fully believe that Dream improved in PvP, but I don't believe that this improvement was significant enough to have the tracking of a low tier 2. I also want to mention that a good Minecraft player like Coldified does not equal a good teacher. Someone can be incredibly good at the game but still be inadequate when it comes to training, so the training with Coldified alone does not explain his inhuman tracking. Therefore, I'm still convinced that Dream used aim assist. If any of you have any other counter arguments below, then please feel free to comment down. Let's move on to the final section. Now that we've established that Dream used aim assist, the question arises on why exactly he decided to do this, and why he used aim assist specifically. Well, for starters, Dream has a reputation to maintain. Many individuals were constantly making videos where they'd beat Dream, repeatedly making him frustrated after every loss he had to endure. It's likely that Dream decided to cheat when he realized that other PvPers were far above their skill sets, making it near impossible to get on their level without years of training. Minecraft PvP is also notorious for cheaters, with 1/5 of the player base using some sort of aim assist, whether this is ESP, aimbot, or triggerbot. When a community is filled with exploiters, players who are legitimately good feel robbed and often unrewarded, making them more likely to cheat themselves as a coping mechanism. While all these points are purely speculative, I do believe that these were the main reasons he decided to exploit. Now, I also want to clarify that Dream cheating in PvP duels is not that big of a deal when compared to his scandal from 2020, as all his 1v1s were purely for fun and did not involve any cash prizes. So I don't believe that Dream did this in a malign or malicious way, but because of strong insecurity in regards to his public image. However, cheating in his $100,000 duel against Technoblade is unacceptable and needs to be addressed. Even though he ended up losing this duel, it is incredibly scummy to even think about using an exploit when the stakes are this high, especially against a creator like Technoblade who trained hours a day for this 1v1. Therefore, while I am disappointed that Dream was an aimbotter, his actions reflect the attitude of the majority of the PvP community, which is why I believe that better anti-cheat systems must be implemented, especially concerning the official PvP tier list, which by the way, in my opinion, is just infested with cheaters. Dream is not the first one to cheat in this manner, as there are thousands of players around the world using similar exploits. Lastly, I want to say that Dream does not deserve any hate as a result of this video. Dream has gone through a nightmare in the past years with false accusations, and I really want to emphasize that this is just a video game. But I really hope that Dream takes accountability for what he did, rather than starting more pointless drama. That is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. My Discord server is in the description, as well as the original video exposing Dream. Anyways, I hope you all have a great day. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.